let's talk about the University of Georgia, your national champion, Georgia Bulldogs. I have found there are two types of college football fan. I'm not talking about casuals and hardcores. I'm talking about even amongst hardcore fans. Let's just split that into subsets. There's the fan that wins a title and then they're content. You know, so there are probably two kinds of Georgia fans right now. One kind of Georgia fan, they just won the title, and you prop your feet up, put your hands on the back of your head, pick out your cigar of choice, even though half of you don't smoke cigars, and you just say, we made it. And you did. They can never take that thing away from you. But then there's another kind of fan that wins the title, and their appetite only grows stronger. I'll tell you what most of those have in common. The ones who get content are usually the younger generation. Not all the time, but it's usually the younger generation, whereas the ones who want to gobble up every possible win they can are the older generation. Here's the difference. The older generation has felt prolonged hunger. Not in the literal sense, hopefully, but if you're a Georgia Bulldog fan, if you live in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and you're 60 years old, your entire life has been a drought. You remember 1980, but man, it was a long time ago. Now, if you're 17 years old, you've, in your adolescence, seen Georgia rise to power, and they played for one title, and now they won this title, and you probably, if you didn't know any better, you think this is just kind of the way it's supposed to be. You know, 10 or 11 win seasons, that's our baseline, right? No. Historically, no. And so here's what the more seasoned veterans amongst your crew knows. You got to take every single win you can get while you can get it. Because once the history books are written, they're written. But right now, it's kind of feeding frenzy mode. Chums in the water. So you got a powerhouse program. You got a coach there in his mid-40s that, for all you know, could be there another 20 years. It's his alma mater. You never have to worry about him being hired away. Win everything you can possibly win. So the mood around Georgia right now is room for seconds. They got a taste of what being a champion is like. That never gets old. Never gets old. So when Kirby Smart got to Georgia, there were some people who said, oh, he's come here to win a championship. Plenty more of them said, he's come here to win championships with an S on the end, plural. You don't stop at one. No one's getting content down there. And the more you think about it, the more you will agree with that if you even were content to begin with. Sustaining excellence, though, it's so hard. He knows that. This is not some segment if Kirby turned on that he'd go, I never thought about it that way. But man, it's hard. What I am saying that for is not to temper any expectation. I'm telling you, there will be a perception with any team that wins a championship that now that's the new baseline, so to speak. And so we got there, and now even if we turn the car engine off, you know, it's like going 200 miles. The car doesn't start going backwards when you turn it off. Well, that metaphor does not apply to success at all. It's like paying the rent every single day. You got to pay it every single day. And if you don't pay it, you go backwards. And Kirby Smart knows that. He also knows every team has a life of its own. So a lot of the ingredients that were responsible for getting to Atlanta, losing to Alabama, but then steamrolling Michigan and then getting it done against Alabama, those guys, some of them are gone. And it's not just the talent. In fact, Georgia, more so than almost any other program in America, will have a disproportionately easier time replacing talent. The leadership, a lot of those guys were 21, 22 years old. They had been there forever. The leadership, we've seen many championship programs before, somewhat struggle. Now, Georgia's not going to 8-win struggle, but somewhat struggle the following year. Anyway, the reason I say that is because moving forward now, you get into that realm where you have to reload instead of rebuild. They recruit in a manner that lets them do that. But the biggest carrot on the stick for Georgia fans right now is they know, and I'll tell you, I believe this too, the program hasn't maximized its capability. Kirby Smart knows this. His staff knows this. They just want a title. This is how good they can be. They just want a title, and they could rightfully do an inventory of their program and find several areas they can improve. Not massively, but if you look at the quarterback position, that's not as good as it can be at Georgia. If you look at perimeter skill, if you look at the wide receiver position, that's not as good as it could possibly be at Georgia. I'd even argue offensive line has not been as good as it can be. It's been plenty good enough to be one of the top overall teams and programs in the country. But my point there is there's still room to climb. Sometimes you end up winning the richest prize in your industry, and you haven't maximized your own potential. Georgia just won a national championship. I don't even think the program has maximized its own potential. So that's got to be music to the ears of Georgia fans, especially because that's not myopic. That's truth. If you watch Georgia offensively, there's no way you watch them and say, that's as good as it could ever possibly be around here. No, it's not. It was good enough. That's not as good as it can be around there. But also, let's not ignore the shark fin that's always offshore when you have some success. We talk about it on the show all the time. It's a blessing when you get to speak this way about your program. The consequences of success, you deal with them. Georgia will deal with them. I want you to think back however long you can. You can go college football, you can go NFL, Major League Baseball. Think about teams and organizations that win a championship, and then think about the stories you hear years later about the follow-up efforts. Not just the next year, but the year after that, the year after that. Think about all the cautionary tales about how success changed a dynamic. That is a consequence of success. No one is immune to it. Okay, it's a guarantee it's going to happen. It's a guarantee that stuff starts to creep in. Saban's dealt with it. Urban Meyer dealt with it. Kirby Smart will deal with it. They all deal with it. There is no cheat code. There's no magic elixir. There's no amount of motivational speeches you can give that changes the human condition. And the human condition says, once I've accomplished something, things change. And once I accomplish something, I've arrived, and it is just human nature to let up. So that's what you fight every day. Now, they have created, I think, a very sustainable culture up there that mitigates that, but you're never immune to it. And you also have different potential problems that pop up that were never an issue. It was never even on your plate when you were 9-3 or 10-2. You get into these waters, they're pretty uncharted. In the modern era at Georgia, you get into these waters, you start learning those kinds of lessons. And really, what Georgia's capable of, they're capable of being there every year. The only case study in the sport right now is Alabama. Maybe to a degree Clemson, but I think it's Alabama. I'm not talking about copying them. I'm talking about if you look at some of the issues they've had, if you listen to some of the things we've said about Bama in the past, there have been times they've played for a championship. I vividly remember that 2018 championship game against Clemson. They got blown out. I remember thinking, how is this team playing for a title? Because it was a mess behind the scenes. I mean, all sorts of distractions. I think that's probably one of Saban's least favorite groups that he's ever had. Team played for a national title. So you never know. My point is, sometimes you can be so talented that alone gets you to a certain point, but yet you still got issues behind the scenes that you were never dealing with before you won big. So Kirby Smart and Georgia just won big. They'll have those issues. One of the fun things about this sport is watching guys elevate and then watching how they handle those consequences once they've elevated to a certain point that kind of unlocks those consequences. But I'll tell you this, I was over on the junkyard earlier today, over on the Dogs 24/7 message board, and one of you put it perfectly. You said, our rivals have nothing left. Don't overlook that, especially in that state. I'm from Georgia. Especially in the state of Georgia, where I'm from, for a long time, they had that one bullet in the holster. Even if you were beating them into a coma every year, some fan bases around the SEC, they had that one go-to, and that is, well, we won a title in 98, or we won a title in 2010. When's your last title? It's not there anymore. It's gone. That is like a 1 million pound gorilla off of your back if you're a Georgia fan down there, because even though you pretended like it didn't eat at you, it ate at you. Especially if those were people in your inner social circle, it ate at you. Well, they're very quiet now, aren't they? That's gone. Never coming back. It's going to be decades and decades before that ever comes back. That's the Georgia mood tracker right now. It's a very good time to be in Athens, Georgia, and be a Georgia Bulldog fan.